I used to think betrayal would come with warning signs, late nights, whispered phone calls, the smell of unfamiliar cologne, but for me, it started with a phone call. I was at my father's lawyer's office, signing documents I hadn't even known existed until 2 days ago. My dad died suddenly, heart attack at 68, healthy as a horse until he wasn't. We weren't close, but I always thought there'd be time to fix that. We had plans to go fishing in the spring. Now, I was staring at his will, jaw slack, while the lawyer, a stiff, pale man named Gerald, cleared his throat and said, "You've inherited the estate, Mr. Connors. Not your brother." That was the moment I realized something was wrong. Very wrong. My brother, Ben, the golden boy, the one who stayed behind to take care of Dad while I moved out of state, got nothing. Not the house, not the money, not even the lake cabin. Just a letter. One that apparently said, "You know why." When I called him, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. "Well," he said with a voice so cold it could have frozen fire, "looks like you finally won." Then he hung up. That same night, my wife, Lindsay, came into the kitchen holding a glass of wine and said we should take a trip to celebrate. Celebrate what, exactly? A father's death and an inheritance I didn't earn? I said no. She frowned, then smiled like she always did when she was trying to hide something. And that's when it started. The little signs. A password changed here, a missed call at 2 a.m. there. I didn't want to believe it. Not of Lindsay. We'd been married 14 years. Through fertility struggles, layoffs, even a miscarriage. She was my person. But in the days that followed, I found a hidden second phone in her car. A burner. No contacts saved, just one thread of messages. "I told you I'd handle it. He thinks his dad left it all to him. Just give me time." I read that message again and again, my hand shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Was she talking about me? I confronted her and she laughed. "You're being paranoid," she said. "You always overthink everything." But that night, when she thought I was asleep, she went down to the basement, locked the door behind her, and made a call. I recorded it. "No, he doesn't suspect anything yet. But I need more time before we move forward. The money isn't liquid. And his brother might be a problem." My stomach dropped. Her voice, calm and sharp as broken glass, confirmed everything. She was plotting something. With someone else. Against me. The next day I opened the safe in my dad's office. He told me once years ago that it held old war memorabilia and a few keepsakes. But behind the stack of medals and faded photos was a false back panel. Inside it? A folder full of documents. Offshore accounts. Millions. Far more than what the will had hinted at. And a note, in my father's handwriting, "If you found this, it means I was right not to trust her. Or your brother. Protect yourself." That's when it all snapped into focus. My wife. My brother. My father. Secrets layered beneath secrets. And I was right in the middle of it, playing the fool. I stood there, shaking, gripping the folder like it was the last solid thing in my life. And then I heard the basement door creak open. Footsteps. Coming closer. A voice that wasn't Lindsay's whispered something low and urgent. I grabbed the folder and ducked into the hallway, heart pounding. As I crept toward the stairs, I heard it, Ben's voice. Inside my house. In my basement. Saying my name. Ben's voice was unmistakable. Calm. Confident. Like he'd done this before. I pressed myself against the wall at the top of the stairs, clutching the folder so hard my knuckles went white. I could hear him speaking softly, just a few words, muffled and deliberate. "He's not ready. We wait. Then we move." My lungs forgot how to breathe. My brother, the one who didn't get a dime from Dad's will, was in my house, in my basement, having a secret meeting with someone. And it sure as hell wasn't just about catching up. I crept back to the den and shoved the folder into a hollowed-out space behind the bookshelf. I'd built the shelf with Dad during my first summer back from college. He always said every house needs a hiding place. I never thought I'd actually need it. The basement door opened. Footsteps on the hardwood. Ben's laugh, low and casual, like he belonged here. "You sure he's gone?" he asked. "He took the truck," Lindsay replied, her voice smooth. "He won't be back for hours." I froze. I hadn't taken the truck. I was right upstairs, hidden in a room I used to read bedtime stories in. And now I was hearing my wife lie for my brother. Hearing them talk like co-conspirators. I grabbed my phone and started recording, heart pounding so hard I could barely hold it steady. "He's been asking questions," Ben said. "If he finds out what really happened with Dad, he won't," Lindsay interrupted. "We just need a few more weeks. The accounts aren't accessible yet. We play nice. Then when the paperwork clears, it's ours." "And if he does find out?" Ben asked. Silence. Then Lindsay's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we make it look like he lost everything. Mental breakdown. Stress from Dad's death. Easy to spin. I nearly dropped my phone. My own wife, my brother, plotting not just to steal from me, but to destroy me. The woman I shared a life with was laying out a plan to gaslight me into ruin. I knew then that I couldn't confront them. Not yet. I needed time. Proof. So I slipped out the back door and drove straight to the only person I could still trust, Dad's old lawyer, Gerald. I showed him the recording, the documents, the will. He listened without saying a word, then finally leaned back and said, "Your father suspected this might happen. That's why he left you the real estate. The money, that's only part of it. The house, the land, the shell companies, those are the real assets." I stared at him. Shell companies? Gerald nodded. Your father didn't just run a business. He protected his wealth from everyone, including your brother. Including Lindsay. But if they find out before we move everything, they could cause serious damage. I asked him if he thought Lindsay and Ben knew about the offshore accounts. He hesitated, then said they might. But they don't know where everything is. Your father hid the key to the final access code in something only you could find. I laughed bitterly. You mean like a puzzle? Exactly, he said. A very expensive puzzle. When I got back home, the house was empty. Lindsay had left a note on the fridge, went out with Emily. Be back late. Love you. I stood there staring at the handwriting I used to find comfort in and felt nothing but disgust. I went straight to Dad's study and started searching. He loved puzzles, maps, riddles, anything that forced you to think in layers. In the back of his old ledger, I found it, a series of numbers next to a name I hadn't heard since I was 12, Rosalie. My stomach turned. Rosalie was the housekeeper we had when Mom left. She was kind, quiet, and then one day she just disappeared. I thought Dad had fired her. But what if he hadn't? What if she had known something? I searched her name online and found one hit, a small obituary. She'd passed away last year. But she had a daughter. Same last name. Still lived 2 towns over. I didn't know what I'd find, but I had to try. That night, Lindsay came home acting normal. Sweet even. She crawled into bed beside me and kissed my cheek. You okay? She asked. You've been quiet lately. I turned to her and smiled. Just tired. Do you still trust me? She asked. That was the moment I realized something had changed in her tone. A test. A trap. Of course I lied. She kissed me and curled up beside me. I stared at the ceiling for hours, waiting for sleep that never came. The next morning I drove to see Rosalie's daughter. She opened the door and looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. You're William's son, she said. I nodded. I need to ask you something. About my dad. She hesitated, then stepped aside and let me in. He told me one day you'd come, she said. And that when you did, I was supposed to give you this. She handed me a small black box. Inside it was a single key. And under the key an address. A cabin I didn't recognize. But it was signed in Dad's handwriting. If you found this, it means you're the only one left I can trust. Everything's there. But be careful, they'll come for it. I looked up at her. Who will? She didn't blink. Your brother. Your wife. And someone much, much worse. Before I could ask what she meant, there was a knock at her front door. Loud. Demanding. And then I heard it, Ben's voice. Calling my name. My first instinct was to run. But I was still holding the black box, the key, the address, and Rosalie's daughter, Elise, had gone pale. That's your brother? She whispered. I nodded. She didn't wait for my answer. Come with me, she said, grabbing my hand and yanking me through the back hallway. We slipped out a side door just as Ben knocked again, louder this time. Elise led me around the back of the house and into the woods behind her property. I heard Ben's voice, getting sharper now. Open the door. I know he's in there. She didn't stop until we reached a rusted gate that led to a hiking trail. Go north, she said, panting. The cabin on the card, it's real. But it's remote. You'll need this. She handed me a worn leather satchel. He gave this to my mom before she died. Set to keep it hidden until the right time. Inside the satchel was a flash drive, a burner phone, and a folded envelope marked for Will, open alone. I took one last look behind me, then bolted up the trail. I hiked for 2 hours, the path growing thinner, rougher, until it finally opened up to a clearing surrounded by pines. In the middle stood the cabin, weathered, moss-covered, and silent. I unlocked the door with the key. The air inside smelled of cedar and old paper. Everything was perfectly preserved, like my father had lived here until just days ago. I found power from a small generator out back, enough to charge the burner phone and boot up the flash drive. On it, a folder labeled Truth. I opened the envelope first. Dad's handwriting again. Will, if you're reading this, I'm likely dead. And if that's true, it means the people I feared have gotten too close. Ben and Lindsay, they were never supposed to be part of this. But I underestimated how far greed can reach. You must finish what I started. My hands trembled as I read on. The inheritance I left you was a diversion. The real wealth, $14.7 million, is hidden within a trust in the Cayman Islands. Only this flash drive contains the keys to access it. But it's more than money, Will. It's leverage. Documents, recordings, signed deals, all proof that your Uncle Charles and two major pharma execs were running a laundering scheme through our company. Your brother found out. I paid him to keep quiet. He took the money. But then he came back. And Lindsay, she helped him. The floor fell out from under me. My wife and my brother were part of something much darker than inheritance games. I checked the flash drive. Hundreds of files. Bank statements. Audio files. Names I didn't recognize. And one folder labeled, Lindsay, 2019. My stomach turned as I clicked it. Video files. A hotel room. My wife laughing. My brother shirtless. Dates spanning months. My wedding anniversary among them. I couldn't breathe. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the cabin ceiling. I'd spent years building a life with someone who used me like a stepping stone. I thought about our wedding vows, her promises, her tears when I said, I do. All of it lies. But Dad knew. He knew and he trusted me to fix it. And now I had evidence. But I also had a decision to make. Go to the authorities and expose everyone? Or wait, dig deeper, find out just how far this goes? I chose the latter. For now. The burner phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. A man's voice on the other end said, You've got something that doesn't belong to you. I said nothing. He continued, If you don't bring it to me within 48 hours, you won't have to worry about your brother or your wife. You'll have to worry about us. Then he hung up. I stared at the phone in silence. Who the hell was us? And how did they know I had the files? I was alone in the woods. And suddenly, I didn't feel safe anymore. Then I heard a sound. Not the wind. Not an animal. Footsteps. Outside. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, crunching over gravel and twigs with the weight of someone who wasn't in a rush. Someone who knew I was inside and didn't care that I knew they were coming. I dropped the burner phone into the satchel, grabbed the flash drive, and backed away from the door as quietly as I could, my breath catching every few seconds like my lungs were trying to warn me they weren't ready for this. I peeked through a gap in the wood-paneled window and saw him. A tall man in a black jacket standing just beyond the tree line, unmoving, his head tilted slightly like he was listening for something or someone like me, about to make a very stupid noise. Then he turned and walked back into the woods, disappearing like smoke. I didn't wait. I threw the laptop, the flash drive, and the satchel into my backpack, grabbed the box key, and bolted out the back of the cabin. I didn't take the trail. I cut through the woods, heart hammering in my chest so loud I could hear it in my ears. I ran until my legs gave out and I collapsed by a stream, miles from where I'd started. No signal on my phone, and only the sound of water rushing past to keep me from losing my mind. I spent the night hiding under a fallen tree, half awake, eyes darting at every snap of a twig. By morning, I was back on a main road, filthy, exhausted, and still holding on to the only thing that mattered, the truth. I hitchhiked back to town, changed clothes at a gas station, and drove to Gerald's office. He was already there, reading a folder that looked just like the one I'd found in the cabin. He looked up, eyes tired. You've seen the files, haven't you? I nodded. Who was the man on the phone? Gerald didn't speak right away, just closed the folder and said, The same man your father feared more than anyone. His name is Marcus Vane. He used to be your uncle's business partner. When your dad uncovered their laundering scheme, he tried to cut a deal to protect the company's name. But Vane doesn't make deals. He makes disappearances. I leaned forward, my voice barely holding together. Why is Lindsay involved in this? Gerald sighed, then pulled a separate envelope from his desk drawer. Because 5 years ago, before she married you, she worked for Vane. She was planted, Will, groomed to get close to you. They knew your father would eventually pass everything to you. They were playing the long game. My chest tightened. I felt like I'd been shot. Not once, but over and over, through every memory I ever had of my marriage. She never loved me? Gerald looked me dead in the eyes. I don't know. But she was never just your wife. That afternoon I drove back home. I needed to see her face. I needed to know if she could still lie to me with that same warm smile. When I walked in the door, she was in the kitchen, humming to herself, stirring something on the stove. She turned and lit up. "You're home early," she said. I dropped my bag and stared at her. "Where's Ben?" Her smile faded for just a second, and then it came back sharper. "I haven't seen him since last week." "Why?" "Because he showed up at Rosalie's daughter's house yesterday, after I did." Her eyes narrowed. "You went there?" "I did." I walked closer, pulled the burner phone from my pocket, and tossed it on the counter. "And I heard everything. The cabin, the plan, the trust, all of it." Her hand trembled just slightly on the spoon, but her voice didn't shake. "You're overreacting. You don't know what you heard." I laughed bitterly. "No, but I know what I saw. You and Ben. For months. And I know what Dad left behind." He knew. He always knew. She slammed the spoon into the pot and turned to me, venom rising in her voice. "You don't understand what you're getting into. You think this is about money? It's about power. It always has been. Your father was a coward. He tried to run, to hide. You can't hide from Marcus Vane." I stepped back. "So you are working with him?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her phone. I lunged forward and snatched it from her hand. She screamed. I backed away and opened the front door. "Don't follow me. Don't call me. If you come near me again, I'll burn the whole thing down." I left her there, in the kitchen, shaking with rage. As I drove away, my mind raced. Marcus Vane, the files, my father's voice on the recordings, and Lindsay now fully unmasked. But it wasn't over. That night, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was one word: run. Attached was a video file. I clicked it. It was surveillance footage from inside my house, taken today. It showed me entering. It showed Lindsay turning to face me. And then it showed something else. A man stepping out of the hallway closet. A man I never saw. Standing behind me, watching me, listening. The same man from the woods. Marcus Vane was already inside the house. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second, not after watching the security footage someone sent me, a silent video clip showing Marcus Vane stepping calmly out of the hallway closet in my home like he belonged there, like he'd been listening for hours, unseen and calculating, standing just behind me while I argued with Lindsay in the kitchen, and the air in that video looked perfectly still, like nothing had moved, like no one had breathed, and yet everything in it was wrong, and the message that came with it, just one word, run, from a burner account with no traceable signature, sent my entire body into a slow panic, the kind that doesn't scream but whispers through your bones, and suddenly nothing around me felt real anymore. The cabin. The files, the people I thought I could trust, because if Vane had been in my house without me ever noticing, then maybe he'd already been everywhere else too, maybe I'd never been ahead at all, just watched and catalogued, like a predictable character in a story someone else had already written, and so I did the only thing that made sense. I drove straight to Gerald's office without calling, and when I got there the receptionist gave me a hesitant look and said he hadn't been in all week. No call, no message, just absence, and she said it like she was trying not to sound worried, and maybe she wasn't, but I was, and as I turned to leave I noticed the local paper on the edge of her desk and saw Gerald's name on the front page, a headline about a sudden death and apparent heart failure in his car at a rest stop outside the city, and while the article ruled out anything suspicious, the details felt too clean, too curated, too familiar. And I stood there staring at the words until they stopped making sense, until I realized that maybe this was the warning, not the footage, not the message, but this disappearance disguised as closure. And the files I was holding in my bag started to feel radioactive, like they were burning a hole through every second I wasted not acting, so I got back in the car and drove west without telling anyone. No music, no GPS, no plan, just instinct and a name I remembered from a whispered conversation years ago, Neil. My father's former accountant, the one who disappeared from family functions right after Dad cut ties with Uncle Charles, and when I found him in a quiet town 2 hours away, I almost turned around and left, but something in me refused. And when he opened the door, he looked like he hadn't aged, just paused, like time had stepped aside for him, and he stared at me like he was expecting someone else until I said a single word, Rosalie, and then he let me in without hesitation, without a question. And the house felt frozen in another era, paper-stuffed drawers, rotary phones, quiet clocks, and Neil didn't offer tea or small talk, just opened an old drawer and handed me a file folder with a label that read contingency, and inside was a map, a ledger, and a sealed envelope with my name on it in my father's exact handwriting, and across the front were 7 words, "Only open this if they find you," and I already knew they had, but I opened it slowly anyway. And inside was a letter that hit harder than anything I'd seen in the files. "Will, if this is in your hands, the fire has reached you. I tried to spare you, but now you know too much. Charles is gone. Gerald was likely next. Lindsay was never supposed to last this long. Disappear if you can. But before you do, finish what I couldn't. The account numbers inside this folder are bait. Leak them to the press. Let them chase shadows. And when they do, go to the vault in Aspen. That's where the truth lives. That's where it all is. And I must have read it 5 times before looking up at Neil, who hadn't moved or spoken, just sat in the corner like a witness, and I realized then that this wasn't just about inheritance or legacy or betrayal. It was about leverage, about quiet power passed down through encrypted files and unspoken warnings, and I copied everything onto a clean flash drive, encrypted it, and uploaded the contents to a series of timed-release cloud accounts set to send everything if I didn't check in every 24 hours. And as I sat in my car parked outside Neil's house, watching the last rays of light slide off the roof like something giving up, my phone lit up with a notification from a video call, unknown number, no ID. And when I answered, Lindsay's face filled the screen, pale and strained, her voice low and distant, telling me I needed to come home, that we could fix it, that things had gone too far, and behind her, I heard a voice I didn't recognize say calmly, "If you want this to end quietly, bring the original drive. No leaks. No drama. You have 24 hours. And then the call ended. No threat. No trace. Just quiet. Like smoke that knew exactly where to settle. I didn't go straight to the meeting. I circled the block 3 times, parked in a different garage, used a side elevator, and left my real phone in a locker at the train station because if they thought they had the upper hand, I wanted them to keep thinking it, wanted to see how comfortable they'd gotten sitting in the center of this web they'd been spinning for years. And when I stepped into that top-floor suite with its glass walls and perfect silence, I saw exactly what I expected, Marcus. Vane standing by the window like he owned the skyline. Lindsay seated like a spectator instead of a player. Her eyes red-rimmed but unreadable. And neither of them looked surprised to see me, which told me everything I needed to know about how deep their surveillance went. And Vane gestured to the seat across from him like this was just another negotiation. Like we were old partners settling a final invoice, and he said, "You've got something that belongs to me." And I smiled, because that sentence always gives people away. It's never about what they want. It's about what they think is already theirs. And I told him I didn't bring the original drive. Not because I was afraid of what he'd do, but because I'd already done what needed doing, and his smirk faltered just enough for me to see it, that flicker of calculation shifting into something else. Concern, maybe even fear, and Lindsay leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. Not cold like before, but real this time, and she said, "Will, if you do this, you won't win, you'll just be remembered as the man who started a storm he couldn't survive." And maybe that was true, maybe I wouldn't survive it in the way people mean when they say survive, but I also knew that I wouldn't survive being silent either. Not with everything I'd seen, everything I now understood about how power protects itself through silence, through shame, through very polite conversations in rooms just like this one. So I stood up, looked Marcus in the eye, and said, "Then let's make it a storm." And I walked out before they could say another word, pulse racing but head clear. And by the time I reached the hotel room I'd set up across town, the auto-send timer on my laptop had less than 60 seconds left. The encrypted archive already primed to go to every major journalist, investigator, and public records site in the country unless I manually stopped it, and for a moment I hovered over the cancel button. Not because I doubted what I was about to do, but because I knew there was no walking back once I crossed this line, and then I didn't just let the timer run. I opened the file directory and watched it happen, one by one, green checkmarks flashing as copies sent out, and then I shut the laptop, sat back, and waited, because when truth finally moves it doesn't whisper, it roars. And over the next few hours the world began to tilt, headlines flashing with names I recognized, press statements pouring in, Denials crafted by lawyers who hadn't slept in days, and in the middle of all of it I was nowhere, just a man sitting in a quiet room as the silence finally broke. And no, it didn't fix everything, didn't rewrite history or redeem the people I'd lost, but it ended something, and maybe that's enough. Because sometimes justice isn't clean, sometimes truth isn't heroic, but if you're lucky, you get to be the one who speaks when no one else will, and that's how the story ends. Not with vengeance, not with applause, but with a name no longer buried and a secret no longer safe.